Hello everybody, welcome back to 10 Minute Reviews. Jason here. Sorry it's been a little while since I posted a video. I'll try and make this pretty quick. Thank you to all of our patrons, all of our supporters. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to check the links down below for links to today's book and anything else that we might find applicable. I need to have some traffic through that Amazon thing that you guys suggest in order for it to keep going. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into today's video. So today I want to talk about my favorite lit RPG series, Primal Hunter. Most of you guys, or some of you guys, will know that it was actually suggested to me by some of our viewers, and it turned out to be not just a fantastic replacement, but a better replacement to Defiance of the Fall that I used to be a huge fan of. Eventually had to stop reading it. I just couldn't handle some of it, but Primal Hunter has just been utterly fantastic from the jump and has just gotten better. So Primal Hunter 10 by Zogarth, we once again naturally have Jake. We've got Jake in his archer class, although Jake is kind of a weird one with his archer class, but also his ability to freeform mana, freeform spells. And of course his deity, I suppose, or his buddy, Vili, the serpent god, the snake god, the viper god, the malefic viper. And in book 10, we finally get to what was talked about in the last couple of books. It was kind of building up to it. Jake is in the C grade, his allies are in C grade. So it's time for the Nevermore dungeon. Nevermore dungeon was hinted at, discussed quite a bit in the last couple of books, and it's an interesting experience. It's definitely an interesting experience. This is going to be a multiple book dungeon for sure. The dungeon itself, they give you 50 years to make it through the dungeon. There are safe cities, safe zones every few levels, every 5 levels, I want to say, 5 or 10, where you can actually portal back home, but your 50-year timer is still running. So people that are looking for max rewards and max renown basically out of this aren't going to leave. And of course that is Jake. Jake, being the overpowered protagonist he is, along with being the chosen of Vili, is going into this dungeon with the firm intent of taking the top spot. Because like almost anything else in lit RPG, there's definitely leaderboards. It's a competition. There's higher rewards the better you do, and Jake wants to be one of those legendary beings per cycle, per universe, that manages to make it to the top of the leaderboard and stay there. So he puts together a party that is downright ridiculous. So Jake, we already know, overpowered as hell, incredibly difficult to defeat. If a little flighty. About the only way you could really defeat him is to challenge him to a naming competition, because his naming convention sucks. But he puts together a party that includes the one person that might have actually beaten him, the Sword Saint, the one creature that should have beaten him, the Fallen King, the Forest King, the Fallen King, along with a druid healer. He gets a healer from almost like a competition, not a competition. It's almost like a not really an auction, but they're, in his coming out as the chosen and talking about going to the Nevermore dungeon, he did announce that he does have room for one more, preferably a healer, and he has one basically dropped on him. It's a druid healer. She's got some ties to some other gods and some other networks basically, and is pretty badass herself. And of course, Jake brings his little burb buddy. He brings Sylphie. So again, this is 50-year challenge, and this is a cool little book. Like I said, this is going to be a multi-book thing, but fortunately, Zogarth doesn't. God, I hope that's a pen name. Zogarth doesn't drag things out. It's not one of those where one challenge is the entire book. He does manage to do some really good time jumps. He manages to really impress upon you the fact that some of these things do take years upon years upon years, but manages to put some well-placed time jumps in there. So initially these individual floors, they kind of follow a minor theme in their little clusters of 4 or 5 before each safe zone, each city-sized safe zone. at first they come out as pretty traditional dungeons, especially going through Primal Hunter. We've already realized that not everything in this lit RPG universe, not every dungeon is your typical trope dungeon crawl that, you know, you might enter a dungeon and find yourself in a meadow and have a dungeon challenge of growing trees or something. I mean, there's all kinds of challenges. So we've got some of the traditional challenges, then we get some other interesting puzzle type challenges, which of course Jake is just absolutely delighted with. Yeah, he freaking hates puzzles. I don't recall if there were any mushroom people challenges, but we know that Jake would not have handled that very well. There's an absolutely hilarious sequence where we have a dungeon created by another god, and this god basically gives live color commentary as they're going through the dungeon, and it's fantastic. It's an absolute riot. Of course, Jake is a little bit too strong, or not too strong. He's got a few cheats in place that make this dungeon, that portion of the dungeon, kind of pointless, kind of too easy. So he just sort of flies through it. He actually breaks a few records in this particular dungeon. Some of the other dungeons drive him a little bit nuts. Again, anything related to puzzles, anything related to combat, of course he's there. Alchemy, of course he is there. But things like puzzles, moral conundrums, you know, defensive ones. You know, we've all played that video game where all of a sudden there's an NPC and your entire mission is to protect this NPC, but they just always seem to want to wander into the groups of monsters instead of staying behind you. You know, those kind of missions also can pop up in this dungeon. All kinds of interesting things. You know, a dungeon, you know, one floor where the entire point is to figure out, you know, to find a few items, but then you've got like this little kingdom kind of thing. You got to figure out who's plotting against, who's plotting for, which side do you want to join. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. And what I really like about this book is it does a really good job of focusing on multiple people. Of course, Jake is the main character. Jake is absolutely the main character. But we have all started to really, really enjoy the Sword Saint. The Fallen King, not so much, but the Sword Saint, everybody loves Sylphie. This new druid, this new druid healer. And of course, there are some brief mentions and sometimes pop-ups of Carmen and some of the other characters that we have met throughout this series. This was a really, really cool book. Really, really cool book. So if you guys haven't read it yet, go out and read it. If you haven't started reading Primal Hunter and you're a fan of fantasy, lit RPG, any of that stuff, go outside, slap yourself, kick yourself in the nuts, then come back in, download the book, start reading it. Start reading Primal Hunter. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for watching. We will catch you guys next time. I know.